Hello, welcome back. So, we are doing something a little different today. I wanted to just talk to you guys about the books that I have read over this year, and this is just going to be my brief reviews of them. So, I have a Goodreads account, and I'm just reading my Goodreads reviews, and then my full video reviews that are usually at least 3 minutes to like 20 minutes long, depending on the book. I will have all of those linked in the description of this video. First book I read this year is Advanced Candle Magic, More Spells and Rituals for Every Purpose by Raymond Buckland. I gave this a 5 out of 5 star. There is something for everyone. Whether you are a newer witch or it has been a decade or two, you'll find something informative that will be beneficial. The information is still relevant all these years later. The rituals and spells are easy to follow and explained in ways that make sense for most witches. Beginners should read the previous book before jumping into this one. I did say that before I read the first book, so I don't actually recommend that. The next book I read was Imbolc, Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for Bridget's Day. This is part of the Llewellyn Sabbat Essentials. Again, another 5 out of 5 star. This is a great book if this is your first time celebrating Imbolc. It covers all the information you'll need to have an understanding of it. The rituals included are great and accessible to most people. I definitely recommend this to anyone wanting to learn more about the Sabbat. Then we have Chord Magic, Tapping into the Magic of String, Yarn, Twists, and Knots by Brandy Williams. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is a great resource if you're interested in starting chord magic. The information can be a bit dull at times, especially if you are concerned about how dyes and fabrics are made. There's a lot of good information included. The only thing I didn't care for in this book is how the only technique really included was to twist the strings. I've never had much success with it and had hoped this book would include more information on crochet, knit, and general knot magic. However, that being said, it's fairly easy to adapt the information to fit what I was looking for. This book is definitely beginner-friendly and encourages the reader to explore what correspondences work for them, which is a win for me. Then we have got Dedicant, Devotee, Priest, A Pagan Guide to Divine Relationships by Stephanie Woodfield. Gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Seasoned practitioners and beginners alike need to have a copy of this book. This is the book I needed from day one when I was very first invited to a ritual of initiation and was told to start deity work immediately afterwards. For so long, the discussion of what working with a deity actually entailed was shrouded in vague responses. This book is a must for everyone who works, worships, or honors a deity. Beautifully written and explained well, this is a resource everyone needs in their possession. Then we have got Practical Candle Burning Rituals, Spells and Rituals for Every Purpose by Raymond Buckland. This one was 3 out of 5 stars. This is not necessarily a great beginner book for candle magic. Not all the things are explained, and some of the spells are not clear for the intention. I wish the author had put in some explanation for each of the ones, as many newer books have begun to do. In the beginning of this book, he says this is strictly a magical book, not a witchcraft book. So perhaps that's why not much is explained. I do think this would be a great resource for Christian witches, since every spell is redone with a Christian focus. The sequel to this book is far more informative than this one, but there are a few spells that I will be adding to my collection. Then we've got Knot Magic, a handbook of powerful spells using witches' ladders and other magical knots. This is by Sarah Bartlett. 1 out of 5 stars. This one's a little longer, and if you've watched the video, I do explain this a bit, but here we go. There's a lot of potential with this topic, but don't waste your time or money on this one. There are a number of complaints others have discussed, but here are my main red flags for this book. Number 1, 0 information about the author. It's likely a ghostwriter who was hired for this project who isn't a practitioner and got their information from a Google search. A good author on the topic will include their own background, which typically includes how long they've been practicing and what tradition or traditions they specialize in. Number 2, no bibliography. Any decently written book on witchcraft, paganism, and the occult will have a bibliography and likely a recommended reading list as well. The lack of this and overall writing style leads me to believe the information is strictly from a quick online search. Many other reviewers have mentioned this, and I have to agree. The oath is out of place. If you're going to have a book for harming none, mostly a Wiccan practice, not witchcraft, keep it consistent. Many of the spells included directly taking away the will of others, which causes harm. Number 4. The spells are all over the place. Eclectic practices are fine, but there is a line for eclectics and appropriation. The one that stuck out the most to me for this was the Chinese dragon charm for good fortune. Meanwhile, at the beginning, you've got the vain goddess of love being called upon for a spell to inflict your will on another. Number 5. This is by far the biggest red flag for any book on the topic of witchcraft, paganism, the occult, and magic, and it is likely overlooked by many. On the publication section, which the editor or publisher couldn't be bothered to even give a a full page too, included this quote: "For entertainment purposes only, do not attempt any spell, recipe, procedure, or prescription from this book. The author, publisher, packager, manufacturer, distributor, and their collective agents waive all liability for the reader's use or application of any of the text herein." Again, save yourself the time and money and skip this one. Then we have got A Witch's Notebook, Lessons in Witchcraft by Silver Ravenwolf. Gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This is definitely a great resource for the moderate to advanced witch. While there is some information to explain, a majority of the book relies on your previous knowledge on various subjects, which is quite refreshing. You can read the basics millions of times in the various books available. Finding one that pulls from that knowledge and still teaches you something new is a feat few authors can achieve. Silver does an amazing job with this book. It is laid out for each chapter to last a month. If you have followed along for her other books and done the work, it is similar but doesn't take as long to work through. If you loved her other books, this will be a fantastic addition to your collection. If you do not love her writing or witchcraft style, shockingly, this won't be for you. She can be a decisive author. Personally, I've loved her works and will continue to buy her books. Others don't love it, and that's okay. She is more lighthearted in her writing compared to other authors. This isn't as teen-oriented as some of her other books, which is a plus for those who found it annoying. Then we have got Ostara, Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for the Spring Equinox. This is, again, part of the Llewellyn Sabbat Essentials series. Another great resource for anyone starting to celebrate the Wheel of the Year. The information covers a variety of topics and gives you plenty of ideas, from spells to rituals to foods you can cook with your coven or family. My only complaint is that the ritual section was the same ritual repackaged 3 times. First, you've got it as a solitary ritual, then as a group, and lastly, you've got the same ritual for a couple, spouses, friends, etc. I wish there had been a different focus for each one. Instead, it's the same thing, new beginnings / balance. While that's great, there's more to the Sabbath than just that. Then we've got Practical Magic for Beginners, Techniques and Rituals to Focus Magical Energy by Brandy Williams. Gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This is a good resource for a beginner. I definitely say this shouldn't be your first book nor your last. It covers a variety of topics briefly, mainly focusing on the law of attraction, visualization, and affirmations. If you are a seasoned witch, this might be a good one to pass. There's nothing that makes this a must-read regardless of your mileage in the craft. Those just starting out and craving more information will likely find this helpful and a great starting point for further research. Then we have got The Magical Household, Spells and Rituals for the Home by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. Gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I hate to write a less than positive review of a Scott Cunningham book. I've loved his work, and this is the first book to disappoint. It was only quick ideas that were just a sentence or two before moving along. I will admit, listening to the audiobook version was better for this compared to the physical copy. The few full rituals were helpful, and some of the ideas are great. I just didn't love the layout of this book compared to his other works. If you're willing to write down the paragraphs that apply to what you're wanting to do, it's fantastic. Rune Mysteries, Secrets of the Witches' Runes, Companion to the Witches' Runes by Nigel Jackson and Silver Ravenwolf. 3 out of 5 stars. The first thing I must point out is that this book is currently out of publication. I happened to find a copy online, which was around $50. After purchasing it, the listing for it was $450, and the last time I checked it, it was nearing $1,000 for the same book. It didn't come with the cards, it's just the guidebook. Is it worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars? No. It's worth maybe $20. If it had the cards included, perhaps $40 to $50 would be realistic. That said, I have bought this because I wanted Silver Ravenwolf's perspective on the runes. Truthfully, it didn't feel like there was much of her influence on this book. It didn't read like other writings. It doesn't make or break this book, but it's something that was a bit jarring at first. The words used are interesting. The historical facts I would refer to other books on the market. If you take this as a contemporary take on the runes, you may find more out of it. As for the meanings of the runes, I found it interesting to include colors, totems, crystals, and deities for each one. This is great if you're expanding the use of runes outside of divination. However, the meanings weren't the same as I found in other books and resources online. Of course, there are so many opinions and interpretations that these may work for you. I found that I like taking up the runes to be a better resource for the meanings of them. The spells and rituals in the back of the book were a nice addition. It does have a heavy Wiccan vibe to them. If this is your style, you'll love it. If you're hard-pressed on being a Reconstructionist, this isn't the book for you. Overall, I'm fine with the amount I paid for this book. There are bits and pieces I've incorporated into my own Book of Shadows. However, if you were looking into this book and it's over $50, really consider why you're wanting this book. It is a guidebook for a deck after all, that is so rarely included, you're really just getting the information written. Priestess of the Morrigan, Prayers, Rituals, and Devotional Work to the Great Queen by Stephanie Woodfield. Gave this 4 out of 5 stars. If you're a devotee to the Morrigan, you'll get a lot of information from this book. While reading it, I do think even if you don't, there's still something to be learned from this. It is a great resource if you are moving out of the Dedicant or Devotee aspect and moving towards the Priestess or the Morrigan. Again, this also applies to other deities as well, I would think. The only downside to this book is that it is really for the Priestess, not your solitary practitioner. The rituals are fantastic if you have a fairly large trusted group of like-minded people. Unfortunately, that isn't the case for a lot of us. The way the rituals are written, it's quite complicated to adjust for a solitary person to adapt this for their personal work with the Morrigan. This is quite evident towards the end with the actual ritual section, but this does play a decent role in the book. It can be hard to remember that Priestess really does mean you're leading the group and or community. Overall, this is a great read for the intermediate to advanced practitioner. There are some gems that you really only understand after years of devotion and work to a particular deity. There are plenty of tales of her experience which will hopefully help other priestesses in their journey. The Modern Witchcraft Guide to the Runes. Complete Guide to the Divination Power of the Runes. By Judy Ann Knock. 3 out of 5 stars. If you're hoping for a book on just the Futhark runes, elder or younger, it's only a portion of it. It covers the Ogham and the Witches' runes as well. Nothing too in-depth, but enough to give you an idea to see if it's something you'd like to research further. If it's a topic you're mildly interested in, you might get something from the book, but definitely don't let it be the end of your research on the topic. Witchcraft Therapy, Your Guide to Banishing Bullshit and Invoking Your Inner Power by Mandy M. This is a great book to add to your toolkit when shit hits the fan. Whether it's depression, anxiety, or life, this book has something that will help you. The spells and rituals are simple, which can be nice when you don't have the time or resources to do a large, fancy ritual. The writing style may not be for everyone. It definitely has an overuse of modern slang, i.e. vibe, AF, etc. I also was a bit disappointed in the lack of a conclusion. It merely jumps from a spell to the index. A final word or conclusion page would have been nice to include, but it isn't a deal breaker for the book. Then we've got Beltane Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for May Day. Again, part of the Llewellyn Sabbat Essentials. Fun times. I didn't actually write anything here. I just gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So, based off my memory, I remember that it focused on Beltane as more than just the holiday for sex, which I did appreciate. Instant Magic, Ancient Wisdom of Modern Spellcraft by Christopher Penczak. 5 out of 5 stars. This is definitely a book anyone considering witchcraft should pick up. The information is relevant for the beginner or advanced, neither reader will be disappointed. The focus of this book is mental magic opposed to using a variety of tools. This type of work has its place alongside books of candle magic or herb magic. Even if you don't use this type of work often, it's a great asset to any witchcraft toolkit. If you love the content in this, definitely check out his book Inner Temple of Witchcraft. This is listed as recommended reading at the end of one of those chapters, but honestly the two go really good together. He's a fantastic writer, and I can't wait to pick up more from him. The Casting of Spells, Creating a Magical Life Through the Words of True Will by Christopher Penczak. Gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I apparently couldn't be bothered to write another review. I remember wanting to have more of the books in this series, and I don't know that he's published any of those yet. Goddesses in the Details, Wisdom for the Everyday Witch by Deborah Blake. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This is a great resource for any witch. It covers the basics a bit, but it's mostly aimed at making a magical life. Many of the topics go into detail where you might not have considered all of the aspects, which is nice. It was strange to read about performing hand fastings that weren't legal because it was still illegal for same-sex couples to be married at the time this was published. Seeing such a huge change in just over a decade is amazing. Overall, definitely recommend this to any witch. Everyday Sun Magic, Spells and Rituals for Radiant Living by Dorothy Morrison. There definitely aren't enough resources for sun magic. This book covers a variety of topics, including days of the week, working with astrology for each month, and a variety of spells using different aspects of the sun. The only thing I didn't like was the inclusion of angels. Some witchcraft practitioners are fine to include, but personally I don't, and usually steer away from books that include it. Thankfully it wasn't overwhelming, but it still took away from the book for me. MidSummer Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for Litha. This is a great resource if you're looking for ideas on celebrating the summer solstice. As always, this series is a must for anyone interested in learning the Wheel of the Year. The recipes are interesting for this one. Fruit soup? Who knew? The Witch's Shield, Protection Magic, and Psychic Self-Defense by Christopher Penczak. 5 out of 5 stars. If you are looking for a book on protection magic, this is a must. The information easily works for the beginner or the advanced practitioner. The concepts laid out in this book are well researched and written. As always, Penczak has created another amazing piece of literature every witch should read at some point in their path. The Witch's Broom, The Craft, Lore, and Magic of Broomsticks by Deborah Blake. There's a lot of great information in this book. Writing on the topic of a singular tool is a challenge, and this didn't feel as if the author was stretching it to hit a word count goal. My only issue is that every single spell requires you to have a new broom. I would have liked an explanation of using an individual broom for multiple purposes. I can't imagine anyone wanting 20 plus brooms to keep up with elemental, Sabbat, protection, nightmare, wedding. I also wished the handfasting parts were a bit more. It's basically decorate a broom, jump over it with a line or two of verbiage, and that's it. We're including a broom in our ceremony, and this wasn't much help. Anyone could write a 2-line poem to say as you jump over it. Overall, this is a good reference book as you begin to use tools and give some ideas for various ways to use a broom. The Witch's Coin, Prosperity and Money Magic by Christopher Penczak. 5 out of 5 star. This is definitely the most grounded and well-rounded take on prosperity magic. Of course, he has a variety of different types of spells and rituals you can do, but also lays out the foundational work. He encourages you to do the exercises prior to the spell, such as clearing out clutter and shadow work like prompts about money before casting his spells. As per usual, Penczak nailed it with this one. I definitely recommend everyone keeps a copy on hand. Silver Spells, Magic for Love, Protection, and Abundance by Silver Ravenwolf. I'm glad the publisher decided to combine her spell books into one. It makes it easier when they're all in one place. I did find it off-putting that the middle book in this didn't follow the same setup with advanced options for each spell. It seems incredibly weird to have Prosperity and Protection have ideas such as different correspondences to try, but the love section didn't. Some of the spells were not my cup of tea. She tells you not to cast a spell on others, then has multiple spells to have you do the exact thing, such as the Stray Lover spell. These enchanted boots are made for walking. Again, not my preferred methods, but thankfully, the majority of the book isn't like that. The Witch's Heart, The Magic of Perfect Love and Perfect Trust by Christopher Penczak. Gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Once again, I did not write a review. If I remember correctly, I liked it as much as the other ones in that series. Everyday Witchcraft, Making Time for Spirit in a Too Busy World by Deborah Blake. 4 out of 5 stars. Once again, I apparently could not be bothered to write a review, but I do remember that I liked this book. The Book of Kitchen Witchery, Spells, Recipes, and Rituals for Magical Meals, An Enchanted Garden, and a Happy Home by Caradwyn Greenleaf. I'm torn between saying this is for beginners and the advanced. The concepts are explained for the beginners, such as monthly moon meanings, basics of herb correspondences, and the Wheel of the Year. However, there is a very little warning on the use of herbs. If it is aimed for the advanced, there should always be a reminder to research how an herb will counteract medications or health concerns. There were a few that could be dangerous to say someone should use. This herb will help with type 2 diabetics. Yikes, seek medical advice before mixing your current meds with herbs. The author does have a lot of recipes for making your own alcohol, which can easily become poisonous if not done properly. The author is obviously Wiccan, and yet she doesn't follow the basic rule of harm none when it comes to love spells. Most pagans and witches would agree that casting a love spell on a specific person is against a moral code, whichever one you follow. For example, you've got an incantation for a spell, Rye of Earth, Pimento of Fire, Eat and surely Light's Desire. Serve to be whose love I crave, and his heart I will enslave. And earlier in this chapter you've got the Set of Spellbinding, Knotted Heartstrings spell, which is to bring the person whose affection you seek. The verbiage in it is concerning as well. One not to seek my love, one to find my love. One to bring my love, one to bind my love. Forever bound together as one, smote to be, the charm is done. Some of the recipes are interesting. The reason this review is as high as I've said it is because the artwork in this book is absolutely stunning. I will say this. It isn't published from one of the major witchcraft publishing houses, which is usually a red flag for getting any reliable information on the craft. It always leans towards trendy witchcraft without the depth you will normally find with well-known authors. It's alright for a casual read, and I had planned to recommend it as a book for your friends or family to get an idea of what kitchen witchcraft was, until the spells mentioned above and lack of warnings. Be cautious reading or recommending this one. Then we have The Art of Divination by Scott Cunningham. 3 out of 5 stars. Usually, I'm a huge fan of Scott Cunningham, but this wasn't a favorite of mine. It was well researched and gives history to a variety of different divination tools. He spends a majority of the book on random techniques, such as water or paper, but very little on the more popular ones like tarot, runes, and even the use of a pendulum was only briefly covered. There are also a handful of random ways to get yes or no answers with the more obscure methods. I had hoped for something a bit more in-depth from Cunningham. Pagan Portals, The Morrigan by Morrigan, and I always say the last name wrong. Looks like Damler, something. 3 out of 5 stars. I did not write a review, but the thing I do remember from Pagan Portals is it's heavily focused on mythology, and I don't care about the Morrigan's mythology, which sounds blasphemous considering I am a devotee to her, and yet I don't care about her mythology, but that's not a big part of my relationship with her. Truth About Herb Magic by Scott Cunningham. While this is an extremely small book, around 50 pages, it is packed with great information. If you're wanting a brief introduction to herb magic, pick up a copy of this little book. book. Lunasa, Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for Lammas. Again, Sabbat Essentials series. Overall, the majority of the information is great. I wish there had been different deities to focus on instead of Lu, Danu, or generic Wiccan god and goddess. The wedding feast ritual was a letdown. As someone getting married at this time of the year, I had higher hopes for the ritual wedding feast. Instead, it made more sense to do that ritual at Beltane. For as much as the book talked about doing marriages at this time, I expected something better for the book on the topic instead of a generic Beltane-like ritual for the goddess and god coupling. The author did at least put a notice about consent for this, which was nice. The Witching Hour, Spells, Powders, Formulas, and Witchy Techniques That Work by Silver Ravenwolf. This is a great read for the intermediate to advanced witch. Silver doesn't take a lot of time going over the Witchcraft 101 information, which is refreshing. She still gives enough of an explanation to those who are new to the specific topics, but it does require some basic knowledge on the topic. The beginner may feel lost or overwhelmed, while those who have studied the craft for years will find it to be a quick refresher. I wasn't a huge fan of the angel information, which popped up often. Some of the magical formulas she tells you to do are far more complicated than I care to do. For some witches, they will take the additional options to make more steps in the ritual work. Some of the sections I didn't agree with, such as taking grave dirt. Thankfully, she does say it's better to take from someone you know, but then also tells you to go to a stranger if they were a soldier. Some don't find an issue with it, but it's disrespectful to me and most people I know. The herbal formulas are relatively simple, but do require you to hunt down some ingredients you likely won't have laying around. Overall, it's a great resource for any witch looking for advanced concepts and new ideas for spell work. As always, Silver's writing style is easily approachable yet informative. Spellcrafts, Creating Magical Objects by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. So again, I didn't write a review, we just have 4 out of 5 stars. I will say I have gone to this book a few times to get spells out of it, so obviously I like the book. Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Honestly, I think this is the favorite book I have read this entire year. All of the books, this is my favorite. I have always had very little interest in myths. It's always been something boring and the translations are difficult to read. I rarely trust myths as a pagan since so much has been Christianized as they were written down centuries ago. This is what I would imagine our ancestors would tell around a fire late at night when asked about the gods. The stories come to life in a way I have never experienced. I will be rereading this often. If you have any interest in the Norse gods, get a copy of this book instantly. You won't regret it. I have reread this book a few times now. I go to it pretty regularly to look up different stories. It doesn't contain all of the Norse stories, which is a bummer because then you have to like begrudgingly go to like the translated text, which is not nearly as fun to read. But like seriously, this is the book of the year. Then we have the Saga of the Volsungs, the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. I'm butchering languages because this is not English, but it is translated by Jackson Crawford. I didn't write anything. I think the basic premise was, I think this one was the one that was mostly focused on the heroes. I don't care. Honestly, the translated versions of these stories are really hard to get into for me. Perhaps as I learn more, I'll get more accustomed to it and I read more books on the topic. But yeah, this one was pretty rough. And it's not on Jackson Crawford. It's the original text, honestly. That's like, the struggle's real. Which is sad, because it should be interesting, but it really isn't. Cunningham's Book of Shadows, The Path of an American Traditionalist by Scott Cunningham. This is as close to a Book of Shadows that we will get from Scott Cunningham. If you're hoping for a lot of new information, you'll be disappointed. A majority of this book is excerpts from his other works. The rest of the book is rituals aimed at a coven setting, correspondences, and recipes. The sections of this book written by friends and family are endearing. Asatru for Beginners, A Modern Heathen's Guide to the Ancient Northern Way. I'm gonna mispronounce this dude's name every time. Matthias Nordvich. Great basic information. It covers the history and a few modern beliefs and practices. I wish it had more on the how to practice this belief system in a modern way. There are no examples of rituals or exercises to do, which is a bit of a disappointment. Otherwise, a great beginner resource. A Year and a Day of Everyday Witchcraft, 366 Ways to Witchify Your Life by Deborah Blake. This is a fantastic book to witchify your life. Whether you are a beginner or advanced, you'll find something worthwhile in this book. It covers basic tools, zodiacs, spells, recipes, crystals, affirmations, and so much more. If you need inspiration for a witchy year, pick up a copy of this book. Then we have Cunningham's Magical Sampler, Collected Writings and Spells from the Renowned Wiccan Author by Scott Cunningham. 5 out of 5 stars. I did not write a review. Basically, this was a collection of the articles and various things he had written, and it was compiled into a book. I like having that. I wish they actually did that for more authors, because I would love to have that even for like Deborah Blake. I love her writing. I would like to have it in one place and not have to hunt down a bunch of old like almanacs and different things that she's written in. Mabon, Rituals, Recipes, and Lore for the Autumn Equinox, again part of the Sabbat Essentials. This was alright for a beginner. The history dragged a bit and often felt like the author was stretching the information. Mabon being Easter for Jesus' death, holiday for St. Michael, and the mention of quite a few Jewish holidays. While the history is interesting, I don't care about the Christian/Jewish holidays around this time. If I did, I would be reading a book on those topics, not a book on witchcraft. I will insert here really quick. I have learned a little bit more about Jewish culture, and that is something that, like, it's a closed practice. They don't want, from what I've heard, they do not want strangers trying to look in and take from their culture. You kind of have to be, like, invited in to them, so including a lot of their culture felt a little iffy when I read it, and now knowing that it is a closed practice, and that the people who are in that community really don't want outsiders trying to, like, pick into their community, it's like, kind of makes it even worse. The majority of this book is heavily focused on Greek and Roman myths, with some Celtic or plain Wiccan takes on the Lord and Lady. It mentions so briefly heathen practices during this time, which is quite disappointing as someone just starting to learn about that tradition. Overall, if you're a beginner, it gives you some ideas, but I wouldn't stop here for researching this time of the year. Everyday Moon, Magic Spells and Rituals for Abundant Living by Dorothy Morrison. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I did not write a review. I will say I am going to be looking back through this book as I start to plan my moon rituals and things for the next year. A Practical Guide to the Runes, Their Uses in Divination and Magic by Lisa Pascal. Again, last name I'm not 100% sure. This is a great resource for learning the runes. I would wait to pick this up if you aren't experienced to some degree in Wicca, witchcraft, paganism, because it does draw on knowledge you'll need to know a bit before jumping in, especially for the last sections of this book. Otherwise, it's a great resource.